U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says verifiable denuclearization remains the Trump administration's top priority and hopes to put a roadmap in place following the summit. But he did not offer specifics about reaching that goal. Helping explore what's at stake is Sung-Yoon Lee. He's a scholar of Korean and East Asian studies and a specialist on the DPRK. Welcome back to our show, sir. I want to ask you about this summit versus the summit in Singapore a year ago. A year ago, basically what we saw was a declaration of intention to denuclearize, and many experts argue that both sides didn't come up more than just that. How do you see this summit as different from the one taking place last year?
Well, it's harder to be more vacuous, more details-free than the Singapore joint statement. So I do expect more tangible terms pledged by both sides. For example, I think Kim Jong-un, of course, is interested in sanctions relief, but also arguably more so in a peace agreement, an end of Korean War declaration, and a pledge by President Trump to sign a formal peace agreement with North Korea, which will have implications. It will call into question the raison d'etre of the U.S. troops in the South. It will render the UN command in South Korea, which was established under the auspices of the Security Council in the first days of the Korean War, it will render it null and void. So there will be some changes that favor the balance of power, that is, favor North Korea, if a peace agreement is signed. In return, I expect him to perhaps open up his Yongbyon reactor facility that had been frozen on two different occasions before, perhaps even commit to allowing IAEA or international inspectors to come into his site. That would be better than no concession whatsoever, but it wouldn't be all that meaningful in my humble estimation, because we know that Kim has several other undeclared hidden facilities where uranium enrichment goes on. You know, 2 steps forward, 1 step backward is still progress for Kim.
Sung-Yoon, we know that to end the Korean War officially, it has to involve more than just the United States and the DPRK, right? Because China was a participant helping the North, whereas also the USSR back then, and the US was helping the South Korea. How do you think there could be a peace treaty without the participation of China and the US and Russia?
That's right. Well, the Soviet Union is not a formal signatory to the ceasefire agreement of July 1953, but China, of course, is. So China has a stake interest in participating any kind of replacement of the ceasefire agreement with a formal peace treaty. To get to a treaty, which in the United States, as we know, requires 2/3 of Senate House ratification, that's a pretty tall bar. So I think the plan on the part of Kim is to seek something that is declarative, like an end-of-war declaration, more symbolic, but that will pave the road for a more formal agreement, international agreement, not calling it a treaty. Trump can do this. Kim said during his New Year's address this year that he would do his best to engage the signatories to the ceasefire agreement, meaning China, also to participate. So this is a matter of some importance to China, because China is very keen, of course, understandably, in maintaining its great political and economic influence over the DPRK, and China and the United States, of course, have various issues of contention.
You know, some say that Trump is in a unique position to solve the DPRK crisis, the Korean Peninsula issue, because he's a less ideological leader. He's not as much involved in the U.S. military-industrial complex as some of the American leaders in the past. But some also say that this is just an expedient measure because it is an election year for him coming up here in the U.S. How do you look at it?
Well, whatever comes out of Hanoi, President Trump will sell it as a victory, as he must. At the same time, you know, fully denuclearizing North Korea will take years, even if it were actually possible. So there's a political stake in this for both parties, and I think Kim has more to gain, because by continuing to be engaged by the United States, by the U.S. leader, he comes across more and more as a responsible, reasonable global statesman with whom the U.S. can do business, and in the meantime is able to buy more time and money in the form of non or lax sanctions enforcement against the regime for perhaps advancing his nuclear capabilities if he chooses to. So I think Kim has slightly more to gain than Trump, but Trump will certainly do his best to sell this summit as another great victory.
Lee Sung-Yoon, thanks so much for your insight as always.